students of the martial arts invariably knew of the Hozoin. For a man who claimed to be a serious student to refer to it as just another temple was sufficient reason for him to be regarded as an impostor. It was well known among the local populace too, though oddly enough, few were familiar with the much more important Hozoin repository and its priceless collection of ancient art objects. The temple was located on Abura Hill in a large, dense forest of cryptomeria trees. It was just the kind of place goblins might inhabit. Skipping along. Although none of the temples looked like the right one, Musashi went from gate to gate inspecting the plaques on which their names were inscribed. His mind was so preoccupied with the Hozoin that when he saw the plaque of the Hozoin, he at first misread it, since only the first character, that of the O, was different. The Hozoin appeared to belong to the Nichiren sect as far as he knew. The Hozoin was a Zen temple having no connection to the Nichiren. As he stood there, a young monk returning to the Hozoin passed by him, staring suspiciously. Musashi removed his hat and said, "Could I trouble you for some information?" "What would you like to know?" "This temple is the Hozoin." "Yes, that's what it says on the plaque." "I was told that the Hozoin is on Abura Hill, isn't it?" "It's just in the back of this temple. Are you going there for a fencing bout?" "Yes." "Then let me give you some advice. Forget it." "Why?" "It's dangerous. I can understand someone born crippled going there to get his legs straightened out, but I see no reason why anyone with good straight limbs should go there and be maimed." The monk was well built and somehow different from the ordinary Nichiren monk. According to him, the number of would-be warriors had reached the point where even the Hozoin had come to regard them as a nuisance. The temple was, after all, a holy sanctuary for the light of the Buddha's law, as its name indicated. Its real concern was religion. The martial arts were only a sideline, so to speak. So the monk goes on to tell him a little bit of history of the compound. Eventually says, "Yeah, go on in if you want to get hurt." So here we go. "I see," said Musashi, "but you still want to go over there?" "Well, I've come all this distance." "Yes, of course." "You said it's right behind here? Is it better to go around to the left or to the right?" "You don't have to go around. It's much quicker just to walk straight through the temple. Can't miss it." Thanking him, Musashi walked past the temple kitchen to the back of the compound, which with its woodshed, storehouse for the bean paste, and the vegetable garden of an acre or so, very much resembled the area around the house of a well-to-do farmer. Beyond the garden, he saw the Hozoin. Walking on the soft ground between rows of radishes and scallions, he noticed, off to the side, an old man hoeing vegetables. Hunched over his hoe, he was looking intently at the blade. All Musashi could see on his face was a pair of snow-white eyebrows, and save for the clank of the hoe against the rocks, it was perfectly quiet. Musashi assumed that the old man must be a monk from the Hozoin. He started to speak, but the man was so absorbed in his work that it seemed rude to disrupt him. As he walked silently by, however, he suddenly became aware that the old man was staring out of the corner of his eyes at Musashi's feet. Although the other man neither moved nor spoke, Musashi felt a terrifying force attack him, a force like lightning splitting the clouds. This was no daydream. He actually felt the mysterious power pierce his body, and terrified, he leaped into the air. He felt hot all over, as if he'd just narrowly avoided a death blow from a sword or a lance. Looking over his shoulder, he saw that the hunched back was still turned towards him, the hoe continuing its unbroken rhythm. What on earth was that all about, he wondered, dumbfounded by the power he'd been hit with. He found himself in front of the Hozoin, his curiosity unabated. While waiting for a servant to appear, he thought Inshu should still be a young man. The monk said Ini was senile and had forgotten all about the lance, but I wonder. The incident in the garden lingered in the back of his mind. Skipping along. When he reappeared and handed him a registry and ink box saying, "Write down your name, where you studied, and what style you use," he spoke as though instructing the child. The title on the registry was List of Persons Visiting This Temple to Study, Steward of the Hozoin. Musashi opened the book and glanced over the names, each listed under the date on which the samurai or student had called. Following the style of this entry, he wrote down the required information, omitting the name of his teacher. The priest, of course, was especially interested in that. Musashi's answer was essentially the one he had given to the Yoshioka school. He had practiced the use of the truncheon under his father without working very hard at it. Since making up his mind to study in earnest, he had taken as his teacher everything in the universe, as well as the example set by his predecessors throughout the country. He ended up saying, "I'm still in the process of learning." You probably don't know this already, but since the time of your first master, the Hozoin has been celebrated everywhere for its lance technique. The fighting that goes on here is rough, and there are no exceptions. Before you go on, perhaps you'd better read what's written at the beginning of the registry. Musashi picked up the book, opened it, and read the stipulation, which he had skipped over before. It said, "Having come here for the purpose of study, I absolve the temple of all responsibility in the event that I suffer bodily injury or I am killed." "I agree to that," said Musashi with a slight grin. It amounted to no more than common sense for anyone committed to becoming a warrior. "All right, this way." Skipping along, he was by no means the only visitor. More than 10 student warriors were seated in the waiting area with a similar number of student priests. In addition, there were quite a few samurai who seemed to be merely observers. All were tensely watching two lancers fighting in a practice bout. No one even glanced Musashi's way as he sat down in the corner. According to a sign on the wall, if anyone wanted to fight with real lances, the challenge would be accepted. The combatants now on the floor were using long oak practice poles. A strike could, nevertheless, be extremely painful, even fatal. One of the fighters was eventually thrown in the air, and as he limped back to his seat in defeat, Musashi could see that his thigh had already swollen to the size of a tree trunk. Unable to sit down, he dropped awkwardly to one knee and extended the wounded leg out before him. Next came the summons from the man on the floor, a priest of singularly arrogant manner. The sleeves of his robe were tied up behind him, and his whole body, legs, arms, shoulders, even his forehead seemed to consist of bulging muscles. The oak pole he had vertically was at least 10 feet in length. A man who seemed to be one of those who had arrived that day spoke up. He fastened up his sleeves with a leather thong and strode into the practice area. The priest stood motionless as the challenger went to the wall, chose a halberd, and came to face him. They bowed, as was customary. No sooner had they done this than the priest let out a howl, like that of a wild hound, simultaneously bringing his pole down forcefully on the challenger's skull. Next, he called, reverting to his original position. That was all. The challenger was finished. While he did not appear to be dead yet, the simple act of lifting his head from the floor was more than he could manage. A couple of the student priests went out and dragged him back by the sleeves and waist of his kimono. On the floor behind him stretched a thread of saliva mixed with blood. "Next," shouted the priest again, as surely as ever. At first, Musashi thought he was the second generation master of Inshu. But the men sitting around him said no, he was Agon, one of the senior disciples who were known as the 7 pillars of the Hozoin. Inshu himself, they said, never had to be engaged in a bout because challengers were always put down by one of these. "Is there no one else?" bellowed Agon, now holding his practice lance horizontally. The brawny steward was comparing his registry with the faces of the awaiting men. He pointed at one. "No, not today. I'll come again some other time. How about you?" "No, I don't feel quite up to it today." One by one, they backed out until Musashi saw the finger pointed at him. "How about you?" "If you please." "If you please? What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I'd like to fight."